Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 54th chapter of Isaiah. And I feel this chapter almost has a misfortune of sorts of being led by one of the most truly remarkable passages in all of Scriptures, Isaiah's 53rd chapter, where we read of a human atonement who a lot of things to digest, but there's just one verse I really want to connect it to. It's talking about an innocent individual, a human atonement, atoning for the guilt of the wicked. But the 11th verse reads, "From the suffering of his life he would see light and be satisfied. Through his knowledge my righteous servant makes many righteous, and he bears their wickedness." So this is a paradox because he bore their wickedness even though sin never knew him. He became sin and bore the sin penalty. So the profoundest paradox of it all is that he became guilty, which he was not, in order that we may be declared innocent, which we are not. So it's truly a precious gift. But this can, in one sense at least, bleed into the 54th chapter, the chapter we're going to be covering today, because this is one of Isaiah's double prophecies, which speaks of an event to a future destination that will come to pass more immediately, and then a longer term. So he's speaking about the restoration of Jerusalem in Judah, which the immediate application would have been returning from their exile. And the fact of the exile was predicted by Isaiah and frankly foretold. And what really started it all was when King Hezekiah, who was an otherwise good king, a righteous reformer, he in a moment of weakness, he showed the wealth that he had at his disposal to the Babylonian ambassador, and he sent the message to his king. So now the king really knows what's hidden in those temples and those palaces and all the treasures there. But also the restoration can be interpreted in a messianic lens and this bleeds into the 55th chapter, which is about salvation. I've done both chapters, but they're not my most polished performance. The content is sound, but you can type either of them in the search engine. But we're actually going to open with the opening verse of the 54th. "Sing, O barren one, you who did not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, you who have not been in labor. For the children of the deserted one are more than the children of the married woman, said Yahweh." Singing or songs or some variant of that word appears a little over 30 times in the entire book of Isaiah, which is 66 chapters. So singing, the song to the vineyard of Israel, he personally composed through the inspiration of the Spirit, of course, in the 5th chapter. I did one on that. You can type that in. But here he's encouraging a woman, which is analogously Israel, or Judah, to sing, even though they have little cause to sing for now, just for this blessed expectation and this future awaited hope, because barrenness in the ancient world would have been interpreted as a sign of divine disfavor, and the children of the deserted one, now their covenant relation was comparable to a marriage in that Israel was to show the same devotion, exclusive devotion and faith to Yahweh, and not divide their loyalties and affections with the pagan polytheistic connotations that led creations all around them. But that ultimately led to their downfall, which Isaiah, remember, predicted some 250 or 150, somewhere in that range, before they did. But he also alludes to a figure who the Messiah, who comes 8 centuries hence. So remember, this can be interpreted in a double prophecy lens, and I'm going to do my best to try to explain both perspectives as we progress. Moving on. "Enlarge the place of your tent, and let them stretch out the curtains of your dwellings. Spare not, lengthen your cords, and strengthen your stakes." It's telling him to make these preparations for the tent because something great is going to come, so they need to be prepared for when it gets here, because the gifts of divinity cannot come but to a receptive heart. We have to prepare our hearts to cultivate the soil, weed out the weeds, and really get it ready to experience the great blessings and joys and expectations which mostly await us, but we can experience eternity even while we walk in the mortal flesh. For you shall break forth to the right and to the left, and your seed inherit the nations, and make the deserted cities inhabited. So their seed is going to be so numerous. They are earlier described as a barren woman, the nation of Israel or Judah, in the first verse. But now he also closes that the deserted one. For the children of the deserted one are more than the children of the married woman. That's in verse 1. And here this repeats and rebounds because there's not going to be space enough in the promised land. So the Israelites, the Jews, are going to expand outside of it. And the Jewish people are far from concentrated in a single location. They pretty much never were, except perhaps in Egypt, where they were all in bondage, but ever since the beginning they mixed and mingled and left freely. But more to the point of the passage, moving on, do not fear, for you shall not be put to shame, nor hurt, nor shall be humiliated. For the shame of your youth you shall forget, and not remember the reproach of your widowhood anymore. Now, what's interesting here is he says you will not be put to shame, yet he clearly expresses that they have shame of their youth. So he's talking about the humiliation. It would have been humiliated to be carted some 500 miles in a desert to uprooted from your native land, which you knew and loved and lived in, and to be brought to be the emperor's city, to be would have been a site of humiliation, and just the fact that they were there was cause for maybe not embarrassment, but certainly shame. But the shame of their youth is going to affect them no more. They're not even going to remember it because they're going to be too overwhelmed by the positive blessings which surround them that they are now embracing in ways they could not when they were ashamed. So sin, the gulf between sin and restoration, just the distance between it, really reminds one of the miraculousness of it all. For your Maker is your husband, Yahweh of hosts is his name, and the Sacred One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the Elohim of all the earth. This reminds us of the covenantal relationship being analogously translated as that of a marriage, where they were to be exclusively faithful and devoted to him and wedded to no other rival deities. And he's not only the Elohim of Israel, but he is also the Elohim of all the earth. So he has plans for every people, not just the chosen people, but he does have plans and is providentially involved, and even in the lives of those who maybe never knew him. For Yahweh has called you like a woman forsaken and grieved in spirit, like a wife of youth when you were refused, declares your Elohim. So once more, he repeats the marriage analogy. So a woman forsaken would have been a woman deserted or divorced by her husband, and this would have caused a grieving in spirit, or to be rejected like a wife of the youth. So that's what he's saying to them right here and then. For a little while I have forsaken you, but with great mercy I shall gather you. So the pains, the persecutions, the trials, and the tribulations that we endure on the path to salvation will be fleeting, ephemeral, and just a flicker of light in this passage of time, the vast infinitude of time, because the eternity which awaits us is going to be immeasurably longer than whatever we bore willingly in the course to attain it. But it's going to be an act of mercy that he's going to gather them from their future state of devastation and ruin and bring them into one and into a whole unity. And in overflow of wrath I hid my face from you for a moment, but with everlasting kindness I shall have mercy on you, said Yahweh, your Redeemer. Once more we have a sense of the the time frame of our of being forsaken. He never really forsakes, and what he did was he forsook the land of Israel from the Israelites, but he never forsook them. He was with them always, even to Babylon, and even all the way up till today. He works in the hearts and minds of many of his chosen people, or Jews rather. For this is the water of Noah to me, and that I have sworn that the waters of Noah would never again cover the earth. So I have sworn not to be wroth with you, nor to rebuke you. So the rebuke that he's administering is once more temporary and fleeting, because eternity, there's a vast infinitude between eternity and life on earth. One is very much measurable and finite. The other one is beyond measure and infinite. But more to the point of Noah was a figure of the antediluvian, so named, the suffix meaning anti meaning before. So he's a pre-flood figure. He was the figure who survived the flood and perpetuated the human race, and he was given, after experiencing that ordeal of gathering all the animals and building this ship in the middle of dry land, he was given the promise in the form of a rainbow that Elohim would never again wipe out all the earth and its inhabitants with the flood. So that the promise that he's not going to be wroth to him, they can bask in his mercy and compassion and love, is going to be as eternally enduring as that promise. For though the mountains be removed and the hills be shaken, my kindness is not removed from you, nor is my covenant of peace shaken, said Yahweh, who has mercy on you. So the mountains, the natural calamities, and the earthly distortions in the equilibrium will they move and shake, they change, they go through flux and dynamics of change and evolution, but his unchanging character is attached to his eternal promise. And covenant of peace. Peace is the result of his power, his presence, and his protection. So all that adds up to peace. That's what we experience when we belong to him. And that's the nature of the covenant which he's speaking of. And of course, he does it all because he has mercy on them. O you afflicted one, tossed with storm, and not comforted, see, I shall lay your stones in emeralds, and your fountains with sapphire. So though they're in the midst of turmoil and affliction and unpleasantness, he's going to turn their sufferings into a crown of imperishable jewels, which is likened to emerald. And so there is a crown of suffering for those who experience unusual or unnatural amounts of pain in the cause of the supernatural. And shall make your battlements of rubies, your gates of crystal, and all your walls of precious stone. So not only them and their wallets and their pockets and their clothes are going to be endowed, and their diadems and everything else is going to be endowed with these semi-precious stones, but the entire city, the walls, the gates, everything else is going to be endowed with these precious stones. So it's not just, they're not hardly the limit or the end of where these stones are going to be. And all your children taught by Yahweh, and the peace of your Elohim great. So to be taught by Yahweh, now in an indirect sense, Yahweh was the one teaching his covenant nation, but he did it through prophets and lawgivers. And but here, this may be a more direct form of teaching from Yahweh. Hence, this brings us to a yet to be fulfilled dispensation. And the peace, once more, is the product of protection, power, presence, plus all adds up to peace. And that is peace which only he can bring. And he brings peace not as the world knows it in John 14:27, but a peace beyond description and beyond reckoning. In righteousness you shall be established, far from oppression, for you shall not fear, and from ruin, for it does not come near you. That word fear again appears twice. Now, the first time is in the 4th chapter, so Israel or Judah may think when they're in this devastated by the exile that they have a lot to fear, but as long as they look above them and see him working within them, they will not be distracted by that which is all around us, rather than be distracted by the circumstances, which may be, however unfavorable. We have to put our eyes and our trust and our love in the one who transcends all circumstances. See, they shall indeed assemble, but not because of me. Whoever shall assemble against you falls for your sake. So that's a powerful ally to have on their side when when we are basking in his strength. There is literally no force in heaven or hell, in space or earth, that can defeat a submitted saint who is basking in the power and protection and the strength of an ally like that. So I think the closing Warm is verse, he says, no weapon formed us can prosper. So this is tail end of the prosperity and the joy they will have, which is somewhat battle derived or deduced. See, I myself have created the blacksmith who blows the coals in the fire, who brings forth an instrument for his work, and I have created the waster to destroy. So there's two things that the Creator claims credit for creating. One, he creates not only the blacksmith, but every human. So every human inventor was invented by Elohim, and every human creator was created by Elohim. And he also says that he creates the waster to destroy. So the purpose of evil in this specific situation, Babylon, they would have been instruments in his hands, even though they knew him not, although some of them would come to a witness through the ministries of Daniel and Ezekiel, perhaps. But that, more broadly speaking, throughout the range of human history, every force is created, providentially arranged, no matter how unthinkably, sadistically evil, it's all providentially arranged. And that can become an act of faith, because a lot of people question the concept of a loving God in light of tragedies such as the Holocaust. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall prove wicked. This is the inheritance of the servants of Yahweh, and their righteousness from me, declares Yahweh. There's actually a lot to digest, so we're going to break it down clause by clause. One, we have the guaranteed victorious formula for spiritual warfare. No weapon, either carnal or spiritual. The adversary's darts cannot pierce our armor when we are basking in his strength and sharing in his victory. And every tongue, people aren't going to like us. They're going to say nasty, ugly, evil things about us. But when the judgment comes, we will be the ones who judge them in wicked. And this is our inheritance. So this is the inheritance of servants. Now, this is the servants, but the inheritance of children is salvation, because we are not only his servants, but his children. And their righteousness from me, that is what makes it all possible, because in and of ourselves, we are miserably insufficient to stand in his heavenly presence. But when his righteousness belongs to us, that then we are washed free. It's almost too good to be true what happens to us at the judgment when we have accepted the atonement and forsaken our own claim for righteousness. And I hope that's the reason you're here, but that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Take care till next time. Bye-bye.